Hey everyone, welcome to CBS Sports HQ. I'm Jacqueline D'Agostino alongside Pete Prisco. Monday Night Football, that is where the Eagles' perfect season ends. It was just a mess, Pete, to say the least, which means there is a new number one in your power rankings, and we'll get to that in just a second. But Pete, if anything, you are consistent. We like to go through the archives, dig up your tweets that you have. You have a lot of good ones, but this is one that you said last night, quote, "Is anybody good?" I mean, is anybody good, Pete?
No, they're not. There's a lot of teams that are okay, and I think the rest of this month and on into December, we're going to decide if anybody's truly any good. But as of right now, no, nobody's any good.
I will say, I sit with my dad, and we kind of go through like pick'ems and stuff, and every week we're just kind of like, I don't know. It's a toss-up. It's hard.
Well, you have some really crappy teams at the bottom.
Yeah.
And you have a large middle class, and then you have a couple teams that are better than good, but they're not great yet.
Yeah. All right. So that brings us to your new power rankings. So let's dive in and see who the new number one is, and it is the Chiefs that are overtaking the Eagles as number one. In Pete's power ranking, they're up one spot. The Eagles drop to number two as the Commanders give them their first loss, breaking their undefeated season so far. The Dolphins, and I'm excited to talk to you about this, are the biggest riser in the top 10, jumping two spots there to number four. And Pete, word on the street is that you're saying to watch out for Tua in the MVP conversation. You're kind of eating your words a little bit.
Oh, I'm putting hot sauce on those words and making them go down a little bit tastier than they normally would, because I'm wrong about them. I've said it again. I'll say it over and over. I was wrong about Tua.
But hey, you're admitting it.
Oh, yeah.
Admitting it is the first step.
Not many people can do that. I do it.
Okay.
I was wrong.
And then the Cowboys, they're dropping three spots all the way to number 8 after they lose to Aaron Rodgers and the Packers in overtime. Getting a look at teams 11 through 20. Speaking of the Packers, they are your biggest risers, Pete, jumping up 10 spots to number 18 there, breaking their 5-game losing streak in the NFC West. The Seahawks dropped to number 12 after they're losing to the Bucs. Or dropped 12 rather, and then the Cardinals up 3 spots to 20 after they beat the Rams. And then looking at 21 through 32, the biggest faller this week was the Broncos, down 27. They were losing to the Titans there. I mean, and then also the Broncos, we'll talk more about it. They face the Raiders coming up. We do want to welcome in our 2-time Super Bowl champ, Bryant McFadden, to also weigh in on these rankings. And BMAC, before we dive in, we want to talk about the Vikings, specifically your cousin, podcast host Patrick Peterson. 2 interceptions and that massive win against the Bills, including one that just put the game away. What was it like for you to watch that, and what was Pat P's reaction after the game?
For me, as a fan, watching the game of football, I rarely yell. You don't usually hear me scream. I don't get caught up in the flow of the ball game. But that game was entertaining, number one, because you saw 2 outstanding teams go toe-to-toe, back and forth, back and forth. The narrative changed multiple times in that ball game. But then seeing Pat P do what he was doing, it got me up. I was literally yelling in my hotel room because I was in Stamford, Connecticut. I had to go to the studio. And by the time I got to the studio, I almost didn't have a voice because I was screaming so loud watching my guy put on for the city. And I just enjoyed seeing what he was able to do, of course, because of Pat's ties being on the Minnesota Vikings. I'm currently a Viking fan as well. So anytime he ball out, we all ball out. He represented extremely well, and he said he's just getting started.
You're a Vikings fan. You're a Steelers fan. What are you talking about? You're not a Vikings fan.
Pete, I'm rooting for the Vikings because I have family playing for the Vikings. Is that not fair?
Okay, if the Steelers,
is that not fair?
If the Steelers and Vikings played, who would you root for?
I can be
no, one or the other. One or the other. You got to pick one or the other.
Well, I would root for the team that's closer to getting into the playoffs. So let's say one team is bad, the other team is good. I root for the team that's going to the playoffs. But of course, I'm rooting for the Steelers. But I also can root for Pat P and the Vikings.
Of course,
I think that's fair.
Of course you can. But I wanted to see which one you would pick if they played each other. And I'm
not answering that question.
You'd pick the Steelers. You just said it, but you put conditions on it, of course.
Yeah, B-Mac, I feel like it's like a game time decision. You don't really know how you're going to feel until you're watching it, right? Okay. So
that's fair.
Yes.
I like that.
And B-Mac, it's his adopted team, the Vikings, obviously, because family's involved. But I mean, kind of surprising that the Vikings are not number one on your power rankings. I mean, B-Mac, how do you feel about the Vikings not being number one after they have this 7-game winning streak? They only have one loss. What are your thoughts on Pete not putting them at number one?
I think I understand Pete's logic in regards to the Vikings not being number one. Me personally, I would still have the Philadelphia Eagles number one. They still have one of the best records in the National Football League. And if you look at the other one-loss team in the NFL, which is the Minnesota Vikings, the Eagles convincingly beat the Vikings at home weeks ago. So I still would have the Eagles number one, but I understand if Pete would like to have the Kansas City Chiefs number two. Pat Mahomes is playing outstanding football. But in regards to seeing the Vikings number one, I'm okay in not having them number one based on the loss. And like I said, how convincing that win was for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Here's my logic on the Chiefs being number one. If my life depended on it and they were playing the Vikings or the Eagles in a field somewhere in the middle of the country, I would take the Chiefs. That's why right now they're the number one team. If you're basing it on the record, the Eagles would be the number one team, like BMX said, because they beat the Vikings head-to-head. So if you did that, they would be number one. But the Chiefs are the best team in the NFL right now.
You just trust Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid a lot more.
You know, all that talk about the offense being gone and not being the same when Tyreek Hill was gone, they've evolved. They're not the big play threat that they've been in the past in terms of the home run balls, but he's evolved as a quarterback, and it's made him a better quarterback. I'm a big believer in the way he's playing. That's why they're the number one. And by the way, Chris Jones is outstanding. If you don't block him, he will kill you.
All right. And moving on, we want to talk just a little bit more about the Chiefs taking up the number one spot and then also kind of diving more into the Eagles. I do have a question about the Eagles, though. Is it a better position to be in to be dropping in your rankings right now versus having that pressure that's building throughout the season, and then you would get that loss maybe in the playoffs? Is it better to have to drop right now, Pete, versus a little bit later and continue on that undefeated streak, like putting a target on your back? I don't know. I feel like it's better to drop in week 10, week 11 than do it all the way at the end. You don't think so?
I disagree.
Really?
And your theory on it, your logic on it is what a lot of people say. Now the pressure's off you. You don't have to worry about going undefeated. I want to win every week.
Okay.
I want to win every week. I want to do something that nobody else did. And is there pressure to stay undefeated? I don't think so. I think there's pressure every week you take the field to win the game, week by week. If you stay undefeated in the context of it, fine. Yeah. I don't think it takes the pressure off. I think you still now after last night, there's more pressure on them. They have to show that they can stop the run, which they can't. They're giving up over 5 yards per rush, which is a bad look for a good team. Jordan Davis will come back and help them. They're also, when they didn't play well, the quarterback pressed. That was the first time we saw Jalen Hurts pressing a little bit. This offense has been going up and down the field. And when they fell behind, he started pressing. So there's things to be concerned about. But losing, I think if they don't fumble the ball late, they probably win that game. But they didn't. Give the Washington Commanders a lot of credit. If you don't stop the run in this league, you're not going to win games.
Yeah, that's the biggest concern for me. The turnovers we saw last night was just an outlier of a ball game for the Philadelphia Eagles. They've been real smart in protecting the football, so I don't expect to see that trend continue weeks on throughout the season. But one thing I do have concerns with, as you mentioned, Pete, the ground and pound defense. They're not big enough. They're losing the battle in the trenches at the point of attack. Heck, if you go back to the last Thursday night game against the Houston Texans, Pierce, the rookie running back for the Texans, was just running through that defense. So, yes, they missed Jordan Davis big time. He's a guy who's their biggest defensive lineman, and he's a guy who can be the anchor in regards to playing against ground and pound attacks. So the storyline is out if you would like to try to have success in beating the Eagles. Ball control, run the football. And I understand when you look at the per yard average for the Commanders last night, it wasn't amazing. But what they did was they got 3 yards here. They got 3 yards there. They got into a manageable third down situation, and they were able to convert those third downs because they were often in 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4 types of deals. Those are winnable deals, winnable moments in third downs for offenses. So that is a concern for me. And oh, by the way, some injuries. You saw an ankle injury with A.J. Brown. He didn't look himself that ball game last night. Dallas Goedert might be out a few weeks. So that's something that you want to be mindful of. But luckily for them, they got to a fast start, but you still got the Giants in their division with 2 losses. Of course, the Cowboys with 3. So things can get a little dicey in the next few weeks in the NFC East.
One more thing about last night's game and the Eagles. Let's forget about the Graham penalty at the end of the game. They still would have had to go drive and get a touchdown, which is something they didn't do much in that game. So people are acting like that cost them the game. It didn't cost them the game. It took away an opportunity to go get a touchdown that they probably weren't going to go get anyways.
And also, Pete, people complaining, I hate the call, but by the letter of the law, that was the right call.
Of course.
That was the right call.
All right, now we're talking about number 4 on your power rankings, the Dolphins. I'm excited to get into this one. They've just been on a tear, and largely because of that guy, because of Tua. Is Tua an MVP candidate for you?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. And I'll be honest with you, I was one of the biggest Tua critics out there. I didn't think he had this in him at all, and he's proved me wrong by 150%. He's just totally played the game the way I didn't think he could play the game, which is throwing with anticipation, throwing on time, throwing in rhythm, accuracy, getting the ball to a second and third read. It's been outstanding, and I give the kid, because I know what he did. He took a lot of the things that people said, and he used it to drive him. And he said that. He said he has the receipts, and he's going to use that to drive him. And okay, I was one of those that didn't think he had it, and so I'm wrong. I can sit here and say that. Unlike Brady Quinn, who works with us, I can say when I am wrong, and I was wrong about Tua.
Okay.
Wow, Pete. We'll put a name on it then. Okay, calling people out. Yes, Tua is a legit. He is a legit MVP candidate. He is number 2 on my board behind Pat Mahomes. It's Pat Mahomes, Tua, and then everyone else fighting for 3rd, 4th place. Tua has been phenomenal, and let's give credit to where credit is due, right? The Dolphins front office. When you look at the personnel they added to help their young quarterback grow, that was a huge plus. Not just drafting Jalen Waddle, but bringing in Tariq Hill, bringing in Armstead. Look at some of the moves they made in the backfield as well. Bringing in Ced Wilson. They've done so much in trying to improve their offense to make sure their quarterback has everything that he would need to have to flourish and be a big-time passer in this league. They helped them out tremendously. I wish other organizations would do the same thing. When you have a young quarterback that you would like to get the most out of, man, give this guy a lot of toys to play with. Because one thing I know about the kids, when they have toys in front of them, they're extremely happy. Tua is super happy right now in South Florida, and because of that, he's putting up video game-like numbers. They're winning games, and his name is in the MVP conversation right now.
Yeah, the odds are plus 500 from our partners at Caesars for Tua to win the MVP. Pete Prisco, B-Mac, we're just going to have you guys hang tight for a second. Quickly recapping the top 10 here. We have the Chiefs now number 1, followed by the Eagles, the Vikings, the Dolphins at number 4, and the Bills there at number 5. We have the biggest people that went down on the list. The Cowboys now down 3 spots in the top 10, now at number 8. And we're going to recap the rest of the list coming up ahead. Jeff Saturday makes his coaching debut for the Colts and gets the win over the Raiders. We'll talk about the Colts' performance and where they land on the power rankings coming up ahead. Getting a look at 11 through 20 on Pete's power rankings. 11, we have the Giants, the Seahawks down 3 spots at 12, 13, the Patriots. We have the Jets at 14, the Chargers at 15, and the biggest riser, of course, after the Packers beat the Cowboys in overtime, we have the Packers at 18, up 10 spots. Where do they start on your list? They were like pretty high, right?
Yeah, they were number 2
wow,
on that
okay.
list. I can't give up yet. And last week, by the way, I actually was going to get a shovel and dig a hole and bury the Green Bay Packers. I said it. They're done. They're finished.
You were going to bring a shovel
So now I'm like in that movie Goodfellas where you got to go dig the body up again. I got to go back out and dig the body up because I think they're alive and kicking again. I can't get rid of them. I pick them every year to go to the Super Bowl, and now that they showed some signs of life,
one game,
they're back.
One game, you're ready to dig up the body.
There were good things, though. You saw a receiver, Christian Watson, emerge, and that's been the one big problem for him is they haven't had the deep threat down the field. That'll open up the rest of the offense. That'll open up the run game. And then defensively, they play better. You come back from 14 down in the 4th quarter against a good Dallas team, that tells me a lot about you as a team. I think they win this week against the Titans, and they're right smack dab in the middle of the race again.
Pete, you call me out all the time about my bias to the Pittsburgh Steelers, la. Let's talk about your bias with the Green Bay Packers. In the beginning of the season, you had them number 1. And then you just flirted with the ideal of them being a top 5. The Packers, didn't you have the Packers either 1 or 2?
No, 2.
They were 2, right?
Right.
I was off one spot. Please forgive me. But then you just flirted with the idea with the Packers just staying relevant in your top 10, top 5, even though they were playing bad football. And now you just mentioned, yes, they were dead. Since that win against the Cowboys, you decided to have them jump 10 spots? 10 spots? 10 spots? Wow, Pete.
There's a lot of bad teams, B-Mac. Look at the teams around them. Those teams stink.
Those teams that you consider to be bad, probably they're better than the Packers, and they probably won this past week as well. So for the Packers, yes, huge win. I don't disagree with you, right? I didn't see that happening, especially the way they won. The passing game finally woke up, but for them to rise 10 spots. 10 spots.
Are they better than, okay, look at the teams around them. Are they better than the Falcons? Yes. Are they better than the Cardinals? Yes. I mean, come on. They're better than both those teams, B-Mac.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. Let me ask you this question before the win against the Cowboys. If you were to ask that question, if I was to ask you that question,
I would have said no.
Coming off the last,
I would have said no.
Well, so 1 week changes the entire
you did
trajectory.
see a big play wide receiver emerge, did you not? I mean, that changes the dynamic of the offense.
Yeah, but he's hurt now all over again. Well, he can't stay healthy on a short week. We don't even know if he's going to suit up against the Tennessee Titans.
They'll beat the Titans this week. Don't give up on the Packers. And by the way, don't they play the Vikings again later on in the season, right? Don't they?
Well, you want to put a steak dinner on that in Green Bay?
You don't ever pay your dinners.
What would it take for you?
I always win. I don't have to pay when I win all the time.
I was just going to ask, what would it take for you to lose hope for them? Like one more loss, two more losses? Like, what is it going to take for you, Pete?
If Derrick Henry goes into Green Bay and runs for 230 and they win by 2 touchdowns, the shovel's coming out again. How about that?
Wow.
All right.
230, okay.
230. Hey, the way they play run defense in Green Bay, sometimes that's not out of the realm of possibility.
Okay, we're going to move on to the Colts. They win their first game with their new head coach, Jeff Saturday, versus the Raiders. He was tweeting out a couple weeks ago, like, the Raiders are so bad. He comes in, makes his coaching debut, and they win. The Colts are up 3 spots to number 21 in your power rankings, Pete. So, B-Mac, we'll start with you. What did you think of Jeff Saturday's debut as head coach? And is this team, are they going to keep winning? Can they still contend? What do you think?
Of all the criticism he faced accepting this job, I think Jeff Saturday did a pretty good job in managing the system. Number one, the best thing he did was putting Matt Ryan back in the starting lineup. I felt like Matt Ryan should have never been benched, especially you look at what they had behind him. No experience, no production. Allow Matt Ryan to get things going. And I think when he put Matt Ryan back in the starting lineup, that boosted the morale of the entire team. Secondly, the offensive line played pretty good football. Granted, they played against a defensive line that has been bad against the run, but the Colts showed up. And because of that, we saw Jonathan Taylor look like the Jonathan Taylor of last year. Defensively, timely plays. Even though there were some miscues from the Raiders, clearly some plays they should have made, but let's give the Colts credit where credit is due. In the biggest moments of that ball game, Stephon Gilmore showed up and showed out, and it seems like the players are just rallying around everything that Jeff Saturday has brought to the table. Let's see exactly what they have in his second week as the head coach for the Colts. They have a very, very tough task coming up this week, but in all, I mean, from going from the studio to from your couch to coaching in the National Football League on the sideline and finding a way to win, that's a huge plus.
Look, it's just football. I say it all the time. It's just football. If you're a leader of men and you allow your coaches to coach, you're going to have success, period. And he's a leader of men. That's what you need to do. It's more important than X's and O's. Let the coaches do the coaching. You lead the men, and I think that's why they won that game. Here's the other thing about it. Every coach out there, including B-Mac's former coach, Bill Cowher, criticizing the hire. What was he supposed to do? Say, no, I'm not going to take the job, A. And B, they don't want to see him have success because then it shows all those years of putting in the work. Really, you don't necessarily have to do that. It's just football.
I think we're going to clip that and put it on Twitter. Did you retweet it?
That's exactly what it is. It's just football.
Okay, so we talked about the biggest riser in the rankings, the Packers. Now we're going to talk about the other side, the biggest faller in Pete's power rankings, down 5 spots, number 27. We got the Broncos coming off a bye week loss to the Titans. The preseason win total was set at 10. They're now 3-6. Pete, are you getting the shovel out for the Broncos now? Is there any fixing for them? Can they turn things around, or are you just writing them off?
Oh, they're done.
Okay.
They're finished. They are done. They played a Titans team that didn't have Jeffrey Simmons and Bud Dupree and gave up 5 sacks, and Russell Wilson was brutalized in that game. They hit him all day long. He's not playing well. The offense isn't good. They can't run the ball. Their defense has the talent, and they played okay all year long. But offensively, they're a disaster. And right now, if you ask the Denver Broncos, if they could go back and get rid of Russell Wilson and start all over again, they'd dump him in an instant. I don't care what they say. They'd be lying about it. He'd be back in Seattle.
Hey, Pete, you just talked about Jeff Saturday being able to rally the troops and get everybody to buy into everything that he is selling. The same cannot be said for Nathaniel Hackett. This has been an experiment gone wrong. Everything that we thought we would see, we have yet to see, and I don't think we will see anytime this season. The only bright spot for the Denver Broncos, as you mentioned, has been the defense. The defense has been balling, but unfortunately, they're getting no help from their offense. Russell Wilson looks bad. Offensive line-wise, they look bad. They just lost wide receiver Jerry Jeudy, not knowing when he will come back. Cam Sutton hasn't lived up to the billing. I mean, this team has been one of the bigger disappointments in the National Football League, and I do not see that changing anytime soon.
All right, that is B-Mac and Pete Prisco here recapping your new power rankings. It's my first time doing this. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we get animated, don't we?
Yeah, you guys have a good time there. All right, so you can check that out, obviously, on CBSSports.com as well. And you can check out B-Mac and his cousin Pat P on All Things Covered. In the very latest episode, the guys are breaking down the Vikings' epic victory over the Bills and previewing what's next for Minnesota, their matchup versus the Cowboys. You can download and listen wherever you get your podcasts or scan that QR code.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.